Welcome back to our channel. Today we're diving into the captivating life and enduring legacy of Ronald Reagan, the 40th President of the United States, through an in-depth biography. From his modest roots in the Midwest to his ascent as a Hollywood icon, and ultimately his influential presidency during the Cold War, Reagan's narrative is one of determination, change, and leadership. Let's embark on this journey to uncover the chapters that defined a man who became a pivotal figure of the 20th century. Let's begin. To encapsulate the essence of the book in a nutshell, it chronicles Ronald Reagan's life and political journey, tracing his path from a small-town boy in the Midwest, through his Hollywood fame to his tenure as the 40th President of the United States. It underscores his profound influence on American politics, his role in the Cold War, and the lasting legacy he left behind. Ronald Reagan's story begins in the small towns of America's Midwest, shaped by the region's conservative ethos and community-minded spirit. Born to Jack and Nell Reagan, he grew up watching his father struggle with alcoholism and job instability. Yet he also absorbed his mother's deep religious faith and talent for public performance. These early influences gave Reagan a mix of affability, moral conviction, and a flair for being on stage. The family settled in Dixon, Illinois, where young Dutch Reagan worked to build up his physique so he could join the football team, eventually captaining it and making a name for himself as a local hero. Although money was tight, Reagan was determined to attend college. He arrived at Eureka College in the late 1920s, covering tuition through a scholarship and various jobs while immersing himself in extracurriculars like theater and football. He graduated amid the Great Depression, which thrust millions into unemployment and brought widespread bank failures. Witnessing the nation's suffering gave Reagan an early taste of progressive sympathies, even as he remained personally optimistic. Eager to escape a run-of-the-mill retail job, Reagan looked to show business, first taking a position as a radio announcer in Iowa. He carved out a minor celebrity persona calling sports events, rising from a small local station to more prestigious opportunities until Hollywood beckoned. He arrived in California in the late 1930s, right at the heart of the film industry's golden age, landing roles in B-movies and building a reputation as the wholesome boy next door. Among his most memorable early roles was playing George Gipp in Knute Rockne, All-American, where the win one for the Gipper line would follow him into politics. Despite this entry into a glamorous world, Reagan retained his Midwestern values. He supported his parents financially, moved them closer to him, and kept a strong personal moral code. His first marriage, to actress Jane Wyman, coincided with his deepening involvement in the film industry, but eventually fell apart. Their interests diverged dramatically. Wyman's career soared, while Reagan became more fascinated by politics and union leadership, especially as president of the Screen Actors Guild. The House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, hearings of 1947 gave Reagan a prominent public stage to denounce communism, yet defend individual freedoms, foreshadowing his later reputation as an anti-communist who still insisted on respecting democratic principles. World War II saw Reagan serving primarily in propaganda and training films, shielded from frontline combat by poor eyesight and by movie studio maneuvering that kept him stateside. In Hollywood's evolving climate, he developed a strong political worldview. Initially liberal in his youth, he found himself increasingly outraged by the power of labor unions, drawn instead to the pro-business philosophies championed by General Electric executives. Acting as GE's traveling spokesman, Reagan was immersed in the speeches, ideas, and personal connections that shaped him into a staunch conservative who believed in small government, lower taxes, and free market principles. In the 1950s, television's massive cultural impact brought Reagan greater exposure as a TV host, just as he met and married Nancy Davis, who would become his fierce supporter, confidant, and chief protector. Nancy's upbringing contrasted with Reagan's, marked by her stepfather's successful medical career and her mother's connections in show business. Their shared celebrity lifestyle, complicated by the frequent absences required by Reagan's work, often produced tension with their children. Yet the couple's bond was exceptionally strong, evidenced by Reagan's frequent letters and telegrams professing his devotion. By the 1960s, Reagan was ready for the political arena. Inspired by Barry Goldwater's uncompromising conservatism, Reagan began to style himself as a political figure who could communicate complex ideas in simple, persuasive language. His supporters helped him secure the governorship of California in 1967. The transition to Sacramento was rocky. The Reagans disliked the Gothic governor's mansion and often pined for Los Angeles. Faced with a significant budget deficit, Reagan tried to cut funding indiscriminately, only to discover that governing required flexibility. He raised taxes while making targeted cuts, including initially to mental health programs, a move that led to unintended consequences like homelessness among the mentally ill, a decision he partially reversed. Reagan's approach to campus protests, especially in Berkeley, defined his hardline stance on law and order. He and his advisors, including Edwin Meese III, took a zero-tolerance policy towards student radicalism, propelling Reagan to national prominence as a conservative champion. Though he flirted with presidential runs in 1968 and 1976, it was not until 1980, capitalizing on public disillusionment with Jimmy Carter's presidency, that Reagan achieved the Republican nomination and beat Carter in a decisive victory. In the White House, Reagan's so-called Reagan Revolution focused on curbing inflation, cutting taxes, especially for the wealthy, and paring back social programs. This economic policy, often called Reaganomics, drew sharp criticism for favoring the rich and increasing the national debt. Still, his supporters credited it with reducing inflation and eventually spurring an economic recovery. His foreign policy, especially toward the Soviet Union, was equally bold. Reagan insisted on a massive military buildup, making strident anti-communist pronouncements and supporting anti-communist forces worldwide. But his presidency was not without crisis. In 1981, just a few months into office, Reagan survived an assassination attempt outside the Washington Hilton. The swift response by the Secret Service saved his life, though Press Secretary Jim Brady was severely injured. Another defining moment was Reagan's firing of the PATCO air traffic controllers who went on strike, establishing a reputation for toughness even against a union that had endorsed him politically. Internationally, 1982-1983 saw tensions with the Soviets remain high, though quieter leadership changes in the USSR, from Leonid Brezhnev to Yuri Andropov, hinted at evolving dynamics. By the mid-1980s, the Soviet Union's Mikhail Gorbachev emerged as a genuine reformer, pushing glasnost and perestroika. Reagan, initially skeptical, undertook a mix of personal diplomacy and continued strategic pressure. Summits in Geneva and Reykjavik demonstrated both leaders' desire to reduce the risk of nuclear war, even if details of arms agreements remained elusive. Meanwhile, Reagan's administration navigated crises like the Challenger shuttle disaster, when he consoled a grieving nation, and the Iran-Contra affair, which revealed clandestine arms sales to Iran and funneling funds to Central American rebels. Though the scandal tarnished Reagan's popularity, he survived its fallout in part due to his personal charm and the belief that he was more inattentive than willfully deceptive. On domestic policy, Reagan's record was a curious blend of hands-off management and deft political skill. Though not deeply involved in the technicalities, he signed major bipartisan legislation, like immigration reform and tax reform, demonstrating he could unify Republicans and moderate Democrats when the moment demanded. Yet on social issues such as abortion, he tended to tread carefully until late in his presidency, showing more ideological firmness in speeches than in actively changing policy. Reagan's second term also brought friction among top advisors regarding the Soviet Union. Hardliners like Bill Clark resisted any rapprochement, while more moderate voices, including Secretary of State George Shultz, saw an opportunity to support Gorbachev's push for real reform. Over time, Reagan warmed to Shultz's vision, delivering the famous 1987 speech in Berlin, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," capturing his readiness to challenge Soviet leadership even as he engaged them diplomatically. As Reagan's presidency wound down, he gave his final address, drafted by speechwriter Peggy Noonan, celebrating what he saw as an economic recovery and renewed national confidence. Many critics suggested that his rose-colored farewell overstated his own role and downplayed factors like the Federal Reserve's policies and falling oil prices. Nonetheless, Reagan left office popular and regarded by many supporters as the man who helped win the Cold War by exerting unrelenting pressure on the USSR. In later years, Alzheimer's disease quietly consumed Reagan's memories. He gradually withdrew from public life until his death in June 2004. Nancy Reagan remained devoted until the end, even as she faced her own frailty. Their final chapter underscored the poignant truth of Reagan's life, a man beloved by many for his warm persona and storytelling gifts, yet elusive on a personal level, even to those closest to him. The arc of his life, from small-town Midwestern upbringing through Hollywood stardom and ultimately to the White House, left an indelible mark on American politics, economics, and foreign affairs, shaping conversations about the role of government, the power of rhetoric, and the nature of leadership for decades to come. And there we have it, the extraordinary journey of Ronald Reagan, from his modest origins in the Midwest to becoming one of the most influential personalities of the 20th century. His narrative is a powerful reminder of the strength of resilience, optimism, and faith in the American dream. Reagan's presidency was characterized by notable challenges and accomplishments, from maneuvering through the intricacies of the Cold War to promoting economic recovery and molding the conservative movement. As we conclude this exploration of Reagan's life and legacy, let's ponder the lessons his story imparts about leadership, tenacity, and the profound impact an individual can have on history's direction. If you've appreciated this deep dive into Ronald Reagan's life, please like, share, and subscribe for more engaging content. We'd love to hear in the comments which aspect of Reagan's journey struck a chord with you. Until our next adventure, continue to delve into the stories that shape our world.